He's fat and he's lazy. He sleeps and he's so crazy. He's my main cat, Garfield. That's me. I wanted to show this off. This is a posterity video because there's a possibility that I might go ahead and melt this thing down. Because as you can see, it's not in the best of shape. It has scratches on it. You can see the paw there. It's actually like the orange coating is off, and it shows the white underneath. So it's not all orange wax. It's just that orange coating and then just plain white wax inside. So was always kind of a cheap candle. I was always amused at how they thought this was a good design for a candle too, because I mean it's just going to burn right through his midsection, and a lot of wax is going to be wasted. You know, like really the only efficient way to make a candle is cylinder shaped. But this was made to be a collectible, and that just is what it is. I picked this up from a Salvation Army years ago. We're talking like 1990s, and it cost 99 cents at the time. The tag is still on there. And I was really into Garfield when I was a kid because I was into comic strips in general, because I grew up in the 90s, and the 90s were kind of a mini renaissance for comic strips, because you had Garfield, who was still popular. You had Calvin and Hobbes, which was the big one. I would really credit Bill Watterson with being the main driver of that sort of mini renaissance in comic strips, because Calvin and Hobbes was just so wildly creative and so interesting, and you know, I'm sure I'm not alone in being like a kid. When I picked up the Sunday comics, that was the first comic that I took a look at, and it was also right there on the front page. I think it was even right on the top. I mean, it was, the newspaper publishers obviously knew that it was the one that people wanted to see. But then you also had Dilbert by Scott Adams, which was also hugely popular in the 90s. That was kind of when he was doing his best work. And so, but then you have Garfield, and Garfield is interesting because it was, as a comic strip, Garfield was always, Jim Davis, the creator of Garfield, was very, he didn't hesitate at all to merchandise his intellectual property. When you go back and look at the oldest Garfield comic strips from 1978, you can see that he's already incorporated in the corner. It says copyright 1978, Paws Incorporated, and you know, so he started up a company purely for merchandising his product. So from a business standpoint, pretty smart. From an artistic standpoint, I don't know, but you know, Garfield was one of the better strips in the 80s and 90s. I think that it's like a lot of comic strips, it's kind of become stagnant over time, and I think I remember reading that Jim Davis doesn't actually draw Garfield anymore, or he doesn't do the strips anymore. He's pretty much retired, and some other guy does them for him now. And even back in the day, you know, a lot of the storybooks and the merchandise and stuff, it wasn't actually made by him. I mean, maybe it was made by somebody he approved to do the artwork, but, and then a lot of the joke books and a lot of the other stuff, like, wasn't actually stuff that he did. It was like stuff that he hired other people to do. But I will say that the Garfield specials in the 80s that Film Roman did were pretty great, and the Saturday morning cartoon was kind of groundbreaking in a way. I remember the cartoon, it started in the late 80s, ended kind of in the early to mid 90s, and there was a lot of kind of vaudevillian humor in that cartoon, which I kind of appreciate. You know, it took a lot of that style of humor and sort of brought it back and introduced kids to it. So that's something I have to appreciate. But if I had to pick my favorite Garfield era, it would probably have to be the early 80s, which is what this is from. And you can tell that it's early 80s because of the design of Garfield. Garfield changed a lot over the years, and not for the better, in my opinion. I really like this kind of early 80s era where he had the circular eyes, and he still walked on all fours, and he still looked like a cat. And he was fat, too. He was still fat. Like, you look at the modern Garfield, and he walks on two legs. He's not really fat. His head is the same size as his stomach. He's just weird looking. He just doesn't even look like a cat anymore, and he's not even fat. So, some of the defining things about Garfield don't even exist anymore. And then another thing that's interesting about Garfield, I mentioned the merchandising. I think that Jim Davis really heavily tried to really heavily market to middle-aged women, particularly middle-aged women who had cats and were employed. Because the whole thing about Garfield not liking Mondays, I mean, when you think about it, it makes no sense that Garfield would hate Mondays so much. He's a cat. He doesn't have to go to work. So what would be the purpose of Garfield hating Mondays? Well, of course, so that, Jane in accounting or Martha at the reception desk could hang up her little poster in her cubicle that's with Garfield that says, I don't do Mondays, or whatever that was, So, yeah, Garfield was always a merchandising vehicle. And you can kind of contrast that with Calvin and Hobbes, which I mentioned earlier, because Bill Watterson was very anti-merchandising. Any Calvin and Hobbes merchandise that you look at is not licensed and not approved. Even those stickers, decal stickers of Calvin pissing on a Ford logo or a Chevy logo, those are not approved. Bill Watterson did not believe in merchandising Calvin and Hobbes. He wanted to keep it pure. He wanted it to, even though he easily could have, if he'd even just approved of like making Hobbes stuffed animals, tiger stuffed animals like Calvin had in the comic strip, he could have made millions and millions more than he did. I mean, as far as I know, the only real money that he made was off the strip itself in syndication, and then from the books. But he didn't believe in doing the merchandising. And another thing I respect about him was that he also quit while he was ahead. He did Calvin and Hobbes for 10 years, from I think roughly 1985 to 1995, and then he stopped. And I actually remember the last strip. It was like on New Year's Day, I think. And you can contrast that with Garfield, which has been around now for almost 50 years. And then also Peanuts, which was still going on. Charles Schultz was still doing Peanuts in the 90s. He was kind of wrapping up because he was old and he was not healthy, but he was still doing Peanuts around that time too. So you had a lot of familiar comics, but then also a lot of innovative comics in the 90s, all kind of coexisting at the same time. I actually wanted to be a cartoonist when I was a kid. I kind of grew out of that. I think my parents made some kind of comment about, oh, you'll never get a job doing that. And I kind of let it go, but for better or for worse. Probably for better, because as we all know, about 10 years later, newspapers became pretty much obsolete, and I could have done a web comic or something, but what are the odds of making money on that, honestly? So, and you could always just do it as a hobby, which, in my opinion, and I say this as an artist myself, I think that generally speaking, art is more of a hobby than a profession. Like when art becomes a profession, it can be problematic. It can cause issues. I think that people who expect to make a living as an artist tend to not be the best artists. That's just my opinion. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this little artifact here. I'll probably keep him. I'm tempted to repurpose the wax because I actually make my own candles at home. But and I make them with a twine wick, so they like last a really long time. I actually have to add wax to them, but I just wanted to preserve this guy just in case I did ever end up melting him down. And I have other Garfield merchandise that I've gotten from thrift stores and garage sales and whatnot. But anyway, thanks for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Share with me your memories about Garfield. One last thing that I want to add about Garfield is Lorenzo Music, probably one of the greatest voice actors of all time. He gave Garfield his soul. I mean, I think that Jim Davis said once that Lorenzo Music is the only guy who could have done Garfield's voice. That was the voice that existed in his head, and he when he heard it come out of Lorenzo Music, he's like, that's Garfield. There's no bones about it. So R.I.P. Lorenzo Music. He was a pretty cool guy. He volunteered on the suicide hotline and probably helped a lot of people, because, you know, talking to Garfield over the phone, and it's probably going to make your day. So thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe to Captain Unusual. I make a lot of videos like this. I tend to put out a video about every 3 days, and they're often about kind of little historical artifacts like this, and then also hobbyist type stuff. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.